Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, joined as by always one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how are you doing tonight?
Doing really good, Michael. Excited to talk about some Steelers football.
Oh, as always, every Wednesday night, we got to be excited. Got to amp up for that. But we have a special guest with us tonight, Matt Belz from Bucky's Fifth Quarter. That would be the Wisconsin Badgers SB Nation site. Joining us to break down Isaiahh Loudermilk. Matt, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great and just appreciative to be here with you guys.
Oh, it really is our pleasure. Now, to really jump into this prospect right away here, can you tell us a little bit about Isaiahh Loudermilk? Because I know of all the Steelers draft picks past May, he was kind of the bigger question mark amongst pretty much all the names they selected. So could you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, for sure. And that makes sense. I know that you guys made a trade to get him and everything. So I'm sure that there's a lot of fans that are, hey, he better pan out. But looking at him as a player, really just kind of in terms of a recruit coming into Wisconsin, he played 8-man football, small town in Kansas, kind of non-existent prospect that kind of just saw his stock rise throughout the summer. The Badgers were able to get him on campus. He had offers from Nebraska, Kansas State, Oregon, was looking at a couple different schools. He took a visit to the Badgers and kind of fell in love with it. But you look at it, and the biggest thing he brings is size. He's 6'6". He leaned down actually for his pro day, really played at Wisconsin about 295 for most of his career, hovering around that 300 mark. He was productive. He was a 3-year starter, but he kind of, his first couple of years had to deal with some injuries, which made it so that it was kind of frustrating. But he was a guy redshirted right away on campus, but then really dove into playing time right away, which is indicative of somebody that they were really excited about. But I mean, you look at his size, he was just kind of a moldable piece of clay that they brought in, and really he kind of turned into a lot more with the Badgers and somebody that they could really trust and value. He's more of a 5 technique, but the Badgers used him within his versatility and size to their advantage throughout the year by sliding him all over the line.
Do you think that that ability to move around the line, is that something you think will translate to the NFL, or do you think he's a player that really needs to get into that 5-tech role and just kind of stay there?
Yeah, I think he definitely can slide along the line. I don't think he's going to be a nose. He'll be the first one to tell you that at times, sometimes he'll play a little too high. His pad level will get up there, but at the same time, I feel as though he can play either side of that nose tackle spots within the 3-4. The Badgers used him a lot. His size allowed them to get creative and go with a 2-4-5 frequently. So that's something that I know a lot of teams are using. He's kind of a hybrid guy that helped them out in a lot of ways. And he clogs up. He eats up blockers, which I think makes him a valuable asset to wherever he is on the line. So I definitely think Jim Leonhard uses a lot of different pro schemes as a former pro guy. So I would anticipate that he should be able to help Pittsburgh at least multiple spots on that defensive line starting out.
A lot of draft experts, and I'll use air quotes around experts, kind of had him in like the 350 to like 400 range. Someone that would be more of a kind of primary undrafted free agent type. Of course, he went around 150 to the Steelers. Was that a surprise to you? Did that make any sense why he was rated so low? Or did he go right where you expected him to go?
I thought just based off of the fact that he had the injury history made it so that I think teams would have shied away, but I knew about his athleticism. Having talked with him, he is the quintessential guy you want in your locker room, which I think makes him somebody that'll fit right in, and why I'm not surprised to hear the other defensive linemen with the Steelers raving about him, because everybody loves guy. His nickname Sasquatch because he's a huge, big guy, hairy as ever. But he's the type of guy that fits in a line, really good leader. And I think when you look at it, I was surprised that I thought maybe 6th or 7th round. I didn't necessarily know he would go in the 5th, but I thought he was going to get drafted. But really, that was based off of the fact that he was a really, really good athlete coming out of high school. Dad played at Creighton. He was a really phenomenally strong basketball player as well, got recruited to play and wound up at Wisconsin as just this guy that we didn't really know what he would bring. And so Wisconsin fans were really excited about him as a recruit, and he really flashed early in his career, made some nice plays, and kind of proved his worth. And then from there, he was a consummate pro kind of year in and year out, and everybody knew what they would get from him. So I think he's a guy that I think it makes sense that he was drafted in the 5th round as a guy you take a flyer on. He's definitely a high floor guy that isn't going to disappoint you. You might not get the huge flash plays that you would want out of, say, a top 100 pick, but I think later rounds like that 150 mark makes sense to me. But I understood why he might end up being an undrafted guy too.
Is Isaiah more of a, would you categorize him more as a run blocker, a run stopper, a pass rusher? Or is he more balanced? Is there any like standout traits that he has right away that you're like, wow, okay, that's going to carry over to the NFL right away in terms of his production?
I would definitely go with he is more of a run stuffer. You look at it, that size will help him out. I know he's leaned down because he wants to be able to make more of a concerted effort to get to the quarterback. He's got good hands. He does some nice things. He's got a decent swim move. He can get quarterbacks off their spot, but he's not going to be somebody who you can look at and be like, yep, he's going to be super disruptive in the pass game. So I think right away he allowed the Badgers to go to that 2-4-5 frequently because he was able to aid up multiple blockers. So I think run stuffer definitely is a plus for him. He's also, with his length, he's good at timing and knocking down passes. He had 9 pass defenses in his course of his career at Wisconsin, and really that helped the Badgers out because it led to interceptions. It led to other things. So while he might not always get to the quarterback, he can get in passing lanes, knows how to read quarterbacks and to knock down passes. But I wouldn't necessarily say that he's going to be a pass rushing specialist or anything like that.
Now, only 7 minutes into our conversation here, and I'm starting to feel a lot better about this pick, just by the way you're talking about him, Matt. I know a ton of Steeler fans, there's question marks there. When they first drafted him, they're like, who is this guy? Didn't really know much about him, just because there wasn't not much coverage. But obviously, just by the way you're talking, it seems like this is a legit prospect. Do you think Steeler fans should kind of flip that switch and be excited about this guy?
I wouldn't go to where they need to be like super excited. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be a reserve player for multiple years, and that you're going to know and trust coming off of the bench. You look at the Steelers' depth; they've got some studs in front of them. You know, like you've got Hayward, a guy who's going to be probably playing in front of him, and it's an opportunity for him to learn. But really, I think he's the type of guy that isn't going to make waves in a negative sense on the roster. But I definitely think that he's going to be able to help them out in specific packages, be able to come in and give Hayward or whoever it might be in front of him some time to rest. And so I think fans should be optimistic, I'll just say, and not necessarily be like over the moon excited. But I think if you're looking at a 5th round pick, that's pretty good. If you're going to get a guy who has definite traits to be a high-end guy who could start, give you spot starts, and then help off of the bench frequently. At the very least, you throw him in there on extra points, and he's got a chance to block a few.
Now, a few years ago, the Steelers took an outside linebacker from Wisconsin who had some really good traits. You know, he was a top athlete. He had a fantastic first step, burst off the line in TJ Watt. And one of the knocks on him was that while he had a lot of strengths, he wasn't very polished. He didn't have none of his technique was really that good. When I look at Isaiah Loudermilk's film and when I look at a lot of the scouting reports on him, I see a very similar thing where people talk about his length. They talk about his strength when he's able to get his hands in the right placement, but they also talk about, the inconsistency in applying his technique. Is this... I don't want to make this like an accusation here, but is this something you see at Wisconsin where they take kind of they're okay with taking raw athletes at these positions and letting them play instead of focusing more on taking players and refining their technique and making them technicians?
Yeah, definitely. Wisconsin really relies on multi-sport athletes and just kind of plugs and tries to develop them as much as they can. You look at Isaiah Loudermilk, I mean, most people thought he was going to be a basketball player for a long time in his high school school career. And then all of a sudden he shifted late in 8-man football, where he was just a man amongst boys, really, to be quite honest. And if you watch his high school film, it's a joke. But he was just an athlete that they took, and they didn't know where he would necessarily fit in. And he kind of just, his body grew and ended up at that 5 technique. You look at Watt, it was a similar thing. Nobody really knew if he was going to be a tight end. Was he going to be a wide receiver? Was he going to be an outside linebacker? And sure enough, he ended up there. It's one of those things where I think Wisconsin takes a little bit more of a flyer on guys, and then it tries to develop them with the understanding that trying to get them on the field as quickly as possible when they have those athletes, because they don't necessarily recruit with many other schools that they're going against, like Ohio State, for example. So I think, well, he has some different flaws, and he's gonna have to improve on lowering his pad level at times and really hand placement and things. I think he's a guy that you can develop when it's, hey, this is his focus year in and year out, and he's just focused at that 5 technique to get better at.
I had a chuckle thinking about TJ Watt playing wide receiver. That would be quite the sight, especially him at his size now. That would be something else. But with Isaiahh Loudermilk, throughout his Wisconsin career, did he ever have one signature game that kind of stood out, or whether he was really, really good or he was a complete liability? Was there any one kind of instance that stands out to you?
I think really he had multiple times where he played some nice football. I think you look in this most recent 2020 season, he had 4 tackles and a sack against Iowa, and he played really well in that game. And that was a big reason why they played well. You then look at some of his other games against Northwestern in 2019. He had 2 tackles for loss and knocked down 3 passes, which I think, you look at Northwestern at that point in 2019, they weren't quite as good. But I think it was really telling that he made some nice plays in that game, and he can help out. I don't want fans for Steelers thinking that he's going to be a guy that can't help out and get after the quarterback at times. But really, I think that knocking down passes and really making an impact in that way and stuffing the run is something that he can do. And he's shown that, and he really shows it out when it's games, when it's a physical opponent like an Iowa, Northwestern, a Michigan State, teams who are going to try to run the ball. That's when he excels. He had some nice plays against Ohio State, including a sack in the Big Ten championship. But really, he's a guy that when it comes to run stuffing, stopping the run, being there and imposing his will and eating up space, he can do that.
Yeah, he sounds a lot like how the Steelers use Stephon Tuitt and Cam Hayward, where they kind of just let them loose and say, go create havoc, go cause problems for the offense, and let TJ Watt and Devin Bush and these guys, kind of mop up and make the plays behind you. Do you think that's really like a role he is perfectly suited for? And because that makes sense. If he's that guy, it makes sense for the Steelers to get him just because they have the athletes behind him to make those plays.
Definitely. That's his sole role with Wisconsin for the most part. Wisconsin's defensive linemen are really not known for getting after the quarterback. That's not really what their scheme is for. Wisconsin is able to bring in really good linebackers usually. So it means, hey, take up those blocks, grab 2 of them and let the linebackers flow. And that's something he is good at. So I think if that's what Steeler Nation is hoping for, they should be happy with it, because that's what he can do. Is he tries to eat up space, eat up blockers, and let the people around him go. And so that's Wisconsin's scheme. And so if that's what Pittsburgh's doing as well, that would be a good fit.
One of the things that Geoffrey and I have noticed, because Matt, every week we've hosted someone from either an SB Nation site or beat writer, whoever, just breaking down the entire Steelers draft from 1 through 7. Now, every single pick, it seems like the guys are being called a captain or a leader or a voice in the locker room of some sorts, or just like a really good person. Will Isaiahh Loudermilk kind of carry that trend? Was he a captain at Wisconsin, and is he someone you'd classify as a good person?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was a leader. He's a guy that you hear players talk about as a guy that they could go to, kind of a confidant that they could pull from. And he was a leader. He would talk to players was vocal. He was a guy that helped a lot of other players in terms of conditioning work, being able to figure things out, even when he was unable to go, which was, spottily throughout his career. He was vocal, helping players out. I know one specific player, Scott Nelson, had mentioned that when he was injured, missed his entire junior year. It was Isaiahh Loudermilk who was there for him, talked to him consistently about kind of his rehab, and kind of helped him understand that, hey, I've been through this. You'll be there. You'll be okay. And so I think definite captain, guy that'll be able to help. And I understand why the defensive linemen are happy about him as part of the group, because he does. I mean, he can fit into multiple places. You look at him as a kid from nowhere, Kansas, ended up making a shift to Madison, now going to Pittsburgh. I think he's kind of a chameleon. He'll be able to help out in a lot of ways. And I think that he's a good fit with you guys.
With him being a 3-year starter, did you see a lot of development between, like, say, his junior and senior year here, where he, showed growth on the field? Or is he kind of a guy who he's been the player he's been since, for the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, I think it was so hard given everything with the pandemic. I thought he had a pretty good year, and he had done some nice things, specifically with his sack numbers. He only played in the 6 games really that they played. I mean, they played in 7 games. He missed the Duke's Mayo Bowl, but in those 6 games, he had 2 sacks, which, I mean, if you're looking at ratio-wise, that's pretty good compared to the rest of his career. 2019, I thought, was a really big breakout year for him after he had missed a few years with injuries. In 2017, he missed 3. 2018, he made 6 starts, but also missed 5 games. But then in 2019, played every single game and really helped them out in a lot of ways. But he still, in those 14 games, only had 3 sacks. So then you push to 2020 when in 6 games, he's able to put together 2 sacks. I think he made an effort, and that was something he talked about in the offseason that he wanted to prove upon, was getting after the quarterback. And I think he did a better job with that. You didn't see quite as many times when he was batting down passes, but you definitely saw a concerted effort of getting to the quarterback and making plays. And so I think that was something that we saw a nice jump from him from 2019 to 2020. But really, the big jump for him came from 2018 to 2019, when he really was fully healthy and really had a full offseason to get ready and play some football.
Now, we've talked, obviously, a lot of the positives when it comes to this kid. To play devil's advocate, Matt, what are the weakest parts of his game? What does he need to work on the most? Is there anything super glaring that we should be worried about?
I would say that at times his pad level gets too high, like, definitely, and that shows up, which is why I said there's no way he's going to end up playing at nose. Like, it's just not something that he can do. He can hold the point on multiple defenders and do some good things with that. But I do think that he is still developing as a pass rusher for sure. So I talked about that. Hey, he made some nice strides. There's still a ton of room for growth there. And while he's a really good athlete, we talk about the basketball ability. He's got some decent quickness with his feet, but you're not going to see that straight line speed. You're not going to see him chasing down a quarterback and making a huge play. I want to say his pro time was like a 4.9 in the 40, which is decent for his size. But at the same time, that's not going to catch up to a quarterback at that point. But that's not really his game. And so I would say that weaknesses is definitely going to be moving his feet and getting after the quarterback, as well as pad level. Another thing is just going to be that injury bug. I talked a little bit about the fact that he redshirted his first year on campus, but then in 2017, folks were really excited about him, and he played in 11 games. He missed 3 to injury. 2018, missed 5 games with injury. 2019 played every game, but then came into the offseason injured and played through some injuries. Finished off 2020 with an injury. And so you can see that there is definite things where he's trying to work on his body. I think losing the weight was a good move for him to drop down to that 275 range instead of, pushing 300. But at the same time, durability issues are there. And in the NFL, you need to be available. Otherwise, you're not going to be in the league. And so I think if he's wanting to continue to hold a spot with the Steelers, that's something he's going to have to work on. And I know that that's something that the veterans are going to preach to him.
Great stuff, man. Great stuff. You had a chance to see how many of the Watt brothers did you have a chance to see playing for Wisconsin? Did you get to see all three of them?
I did. Yeah, I got to see all three. And I will say this, that in college, I definitely thought, before JJ left for the NFL, I don't think anybody knew that JJ was going to be what he was. But TJ, I think most Badger fans knew was going to be an animal in the NFL.
So you were expecting what we've seen from TJ Watt on the Steelers.
Maybe not the all-pro status and winning all the awards that he has, but I think I anticipated that he was going to make a big impact. And as a Packers fan, I still will not forgive them for passing on him to take Kevin King. And so I can't look at Kevin King without thinking of the fact that TJ Watt was not taken. So yes, I definitely thought that he was going to be a really good player.
If it makes it feel any better, the Cowboys took Taco Charlton, so it could have been worse.
Yep.
Geoffrey, did you have a follow-up to the Watt stuff?
No, I just wanted to drop that in there.
I'm sure we'll get back to that in a moment, but you mentioned Isaiah's injuries. Do you know what they were, just so we kind of have a handle of what those injuries were that he battled over his time?
Yeah, so he's had a knee injury. Most of his injuries weren't he didn't tear an ACL or anything like that, but it was a big enough knee injury that he had to have surgery. Then it was an ankle injury that it just kind of kept popping back and forth on him. And then there was an arm injury that he was in a sling. And that was really I think I want to say it was spring ball or fall camp where he just missed some time, ended up being fine for the season. But you may notice in watching film on him that he plays with a pretty big brace on one of his arms. That was because of that an arm injury, if I can get the marbles out of my mouth.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Live chat gets him every week.
Is there anything about Isaiah Loudermilk that's really flying under the radar? Something that people may not have heard about, won't expect, but should be aware of?
I think really the thing to know is that really he is a guy that is not going to be super outspoken in terms of the locker room and with the media and everything. But at the same time, he is a really hard worker and he's a player that people love. All around him, you only hear positive things about him. So character-wise, the Steelers knocked it out the park. He's a really good player, but a better person off the field. You listen to him talk with the media, and he's a really smart kid, graduated from UW, and he's just the type of guy you want on your team. But I just think that people should just know that he's not going to be the next Cam Hayward. I wouldn't put that on him, and very few people should. But at the same time, I think he's a guy that can help you folks out for a long time.
I'm going to steal some of Geoffrey's thunder here because he was doing some research on you, Matt, as he does all our guests. And when you attended Wisconsin, Matt Canada would have been the offense coordinator for the Wisconsin Badgers. When you attended school there, what can Steeler fans kind of expect from this offense to kind of transition a little bit from our topic, but still Steelers related? What did you see when Matt Canada was running the show for the Badgers?
A ton of motion. You look at it, and that's something that even Paul Chris now uses with the Badgers, but a ton of formation shifts and a lot of movement pre-snap, which would be good because you've got a veteran quarterback who can do all of that. He's kind of changed a lot throughout his time as an offensive coordinator as he's gained experience, but really the motion part of everything pre-snap will continue to be there. You'll see tight ends shifting, going one way and then coming back the other way. You'll see running backs coming out of the backfield. You'll see probably a little bit more fullback. You'll see all sorts of things in creativity from him. I know, thinking back to Wisconsin, the fondest memory of people we'll have of him is the Big Ten championship when Wisconsin just ran all over Nebraska, and they used the jet sweep over and over again on the Cornhuskers. And really, I think you look at it, his time in Wisconsin he kind of had a governor on him because Brett Bielema and him kind of, didn't get along and see eye to eye. And so Brett Bielema was kind of calling a lot of plays and doing some things to take away his ability. So I would just know that was something in our experience with him. But I know that when he took that away in the Big Ten championship, the Badgers ran wild.
So we did get a super chat here that I'm going to actually throw it over to Geoffrey first. This comes from Sean Manahan. He puts $2 in the tip jar. He says, is there anywhere Matt Canada hasn't coached? Geoffrey, I'm pretty certain you know this by heart. Can you list every team that he's been on up until his time with the Steelers here? Well, at least like the last couple of years.
Let's see if I can do this. He went to school at Indiana. He was there. They cut a whole bunch of coaching staff, so they needed him as a graduate assistant. He worked there as a graduate assistant. Then he went to work for a friend of his head coach that he was a graduate assistant for that was working at Butler. Then he goes to Northern Illinois for a little bit. Then he goes back to Indiana, ends up their offensive coordinator, goes back to Northern Illinois. I think then he goes to Wisconsin. After Wisconsin, we're at 2013. Oh gosh, is that
this
NC
is where it gets
State?
Easier. Yes,
That's NC State. 3 seasons at NC State. He then goes to Pitt. Then he goes to LSU. Then he goes to Maryland. Then he takes a year off, and then he's a Pittsburgh Steeler.
You
Impressive.
nailed that entirely.
I nailed that?
I was looking at his Wikipedia pages. So you riled that off. That was impressive.
That was from memory. I've looked that up so many times to be like, wait, where was he in 2014? You just don't know.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Unless like you were saying, there was rumors he didn't get along with some people. That seems to be a thing that has followed him wherever he goes. Is there's kind of some issues between him and his coaches. Now, Mike Tomlin has obviously worked with some people who aren't the easiest to work with before. We had Todd Haley as offensive coordinator here. But do you think that can get overrated, or do you think he has the chance to be kind of that problematic person in a locker room?
I'm not totally sure, because when you look at who he was having a problem with, it was Brett Bielema, who a lot of people also have a problem with. So it's hard to know from my experience with the Badgers. But I do know that in following his career since, I did not know it nearly as well as you did. But I would say that he that has been a trend or something that has popped up at a few different spots. So I think when you look at it, he's got a really good mind for football. He knows his stuff. He's a really smart guy. But I do think that oftentimes, the little idiosyncrasies that people hold can sometimes grind on others. And maybe that's just something that he brings to the table, which you got to deal with. But I think Mike Tomlin's a strong enough presence to kind of put him in his place, which I think is good.
I was born in Michigan. I'm a University of Michigan fan. So that 2012 winning the Big Ten championship, blowing out Nebraska, I loved that game. Then when he went to like Maryland and ran all over Ohio State with Anthony McFarland, nearly beat them, I loved that. And then of course I'm living here in Pittsburgh, and when Pitt beat Clemson, that like Matt Canada's been on my radar for a while, and he's a name that keeps popping up. You're like, whoa, who is this guy? And then now the Steelers have him, so hopefully good things work. And he's reuniting with Derek Watt, who was with him in 2012.
Yep.
That leads me into what I was going to ask, because of course we did talk about the two slightly bigger name Watt brothers, just slightly. Of course, Derek Watt, the middle child, of course, it just always seems to be that way, I guess. But they're all the NFL. I'm not. I'm talking about a podcast anyway. Derek Watt, he didn't really fit the Steelers system last year, but you saw him with Matt Canada. What can we expect from him in this kind of offense now?
Yeah, I mean, he's a traditional blocking fullback. He can do a little bit in the pass game, and he was a former running back and linebacker in high school, so he can run with the ball. But you're not going to see him as somebody who's going to be making and breaking huge plays out of the backfield. He's not like an H-back type of fullback that you're going to be using in explosive situations. But in terms of being a block first guy, he's pretty strong. And he was a guy that Wisconsin has had a good pedigree of sending fullbacks into the league and them sticking. I think he is just another key piece that will keep that going. And I think if you are leaning towards a run-heavy attack, he will fit that, especially when you look at the most recent draft picks that you all made.
So that takes us to the 30-minute mark in the end of our time with Matt. Before you go, is there anything you want to plug for the people?
If any of you are actually Wisconsin fans and want to check out our podcast, it's Bucky's Fifth Podcast. We talk about Wisconsin football, a little bit different. But at the same time, I definitely always keep an eye on the Steelers because of both the Watt brothers. And so I hope you guys have a great season.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate you for taking the time to hang out with us tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, so everyone watching on YouTube and Facebook, just hang tight. We'll just do a quick couple-second break. If you're listening on the podcast platform side, you can click over to part 2 now. Heck, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it might just automatically play part 2 for you. So just hang tight. We'll be back in a minute. All right, Steeler fans, it is time for the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. Once again, my name is Michael Beck. The guy to my right, I guess, here on this on the screen, Mr. Geoffrey. Yeah, turn around. It's kind of hard directions on a computer. Actually, I'm looking at. I guess you're on my right, but you're on my left. I don't know. We'll just ignore it. This podcast is about Isaiahh Loudermilk. Of course, I'm talking to Geoffrey Benedict. What are your thoughts on this pick now? Of course, talking about him for 30 minutes, I feel like my impressions has changed dramatically ever since he's been drafted. His kind of stock has gone up in my book. Do you feel better about it now? Because I know we did the podcast on draft day. We hated the pick. What do you think of it now?
I was not a big fan of his film, right? And then Kevin was the guy who actually did, Kevin KT Smith, did his film breakdown for the site. And he was not a fan. He was less of a fan of his film than I was. But for me, I have to go back to the 2020 draft when the Steelers in the 7th round took Carlos Davis. And I looked at his film and I'm like, this is the worst defensive lineman I've ever seen. Like, watching college film for someone who was picked. I've seen better film from undrafted free agents. Like, what are the Steelers doing? This was a wasted pick. And then in the season, week 9, he comes in and has to play, and he looks good. By the end of the season, he's looking like a guy that could compete with compete for like the number 3, number 4 defensive lineman role. So for me, I look at that and say, you know what? They do a better job than I do at scouting talent. They tend to see things and look at guys and say, okay, here's a problem we can fix. Here's a trait we can't teach this other guy, and we can fix this guy's problem. So to me, you look at his strengths, you see that length, you see the power and the disruption he shows when his technique is on, right? When he has his technique going right, he is a disruptive force with his length, and he is a nasty person to try and deal with. If the Steelers can iron out his technique, if they can take this guy and turn him to someone who is play in and play out doing the right things, you're going to see that kind of Carlos Davis jump from him where he goes from like a guy you're like, ooh, no, his college film was bad, to a guy you look at on film and you're like, whoa, actually, this guy's doing really good stuff. Carlos Davis has a lot of athleticism. He brings a great first step. That showed up in film, and I expect this guy, I expect to see his length and his power showing up by the end of his rookie season.
Here, I'll load this question up from Andrew Wilbar in the live chat here. He asked me if I think he's going to be worth the 4th round draft pick. Of course, Isaiahh Loudermilk was traded for that 4th round pick in 2022. And that one's going to be really tough because that's like a 4th round pick. You're kind of expecting someone to play at least a little bit. I think we won't know for several years until like we start to see like Cam and Stephon start to like, I guess, retire, move on in their endeavors, to see what kind of Isaiah Loudermilk does as someone who could potentially be a replacement. So I hate to be the depends guy, but it really does. I think the defensive linemen are deeper in next year's draft too, so that's kind of the unfortunate side. But I guess we'll kind of have to wait and see at how he does at least through one season. Geoffrey, Andrew also asked a question to you. He says, any chance we could use his length as an oversized edge occasionally on running downs?
I don't think you'll see that right off the bat. But I think I've covered a decent bit in film rooms. The Steelers using a 4-3 look where Cam Hayward plays the defensive end, like the edge spot. And they did that a lot, like say like Baltimore, they unbalanced the line, right? So they've got multiple tight ends on one side, so they're threatening to run that way. Well, the Steelers, instead of putting extra players there, the Steelers would put Cam Hayward over those two tight ends, and you would have the offense trying to block Cam Hayward with two tight ends, which Cam Hayward would just like throw people to the ground and destroy your run play. And then they had numbers to the side that had the offensive linemen but fewer players. They do that formation a good bit. I could see him there in the future if he really develops and he gets his game together. I could see him playing that kind of a role. But for now, that's Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward is just an absolute beast out there. And he just, it's one of my favorite things to do. Anytime they're in that formation, you see a team put two tight ends on one side and you see Cam Hayward step out there and become the edge. I just get giddy inside, just waiting to see if he's going to throw both of them or just one or just drive them back into the backfield. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So he's not going to take that from Cam Hayward right away. But he definitely has that kind of potential to be that player.
Yeah, that'll be one of the things to watch as well. And as his career progresses, it might not be this year, might not even be next year, but maybe 2023, he kind of takes that next step. I think for me personally, my kind of opinion on him changed a little bit before ever having seen him play, just by like the captains of this defense saying like, oh yeah, he fits in, like he's good in the room. We like this guy. He's balling out. He looked great. That changed my opinion with him. But what I want to ask you, Geoffrey, it's kind of been one of the underlying themes that every show has talked about a lot this offseason. The Steelers are returning every single defensive lineman from last year, every single one. And then they added another one in Isaiah Loudermilk to that spot. That doesn't even mention that the Steelers carried more defensive linemen than they typically do, like they did in 2020. Now we have an extra guy. So my question to you is, which of these 9 defensive returners / draftees, which one of those guys gets cut, and how do you see like the day one depth chart shaping out?
Well, you put me on the spot with Canada's teams. Can you name them all?
All of Canada's teams?
No. Can you name all the defensive linemen currently on the roster? The 9 guys that you're expecting here.
Hayward, Alualu, Tuitt, Bugs, Mondo, Carlos Davis, Isaiah Loudermilk. Was there more?
Michigan guy. You're missing the Michigan guy.
The Michigan guy? Oh, no. I can't do it. Who was it?
Chris Wormley.
Oh, goodness me. Yeah. Yes, Chris Wormley.
You don't know him as the guy who came from the Ravens. I know him as the guy from Michigan.
Right. Of course you do. But who's getting cut?
That's tough. I think they brought him in knowing that they were going to have to make a tough cut. But I do think I do want to say I think they bring as many as they brought last season because with 17 games, they're going to want to keep Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt fresh. That defensive line is the heart of the Steelers' defense. You know, as good as TJ, as good as Minka, as good as Devin Bush are, that defensive line is the heart of that and soul of that defense. For me, see, it's hard because for me, the obvious choice is Mondo. But at the same point, he's one of the better pass rushers of the reserves. He's probably behind. He might be better pass rusher than Alualu even. Like we don't have much beyond Hayward and Tuitt to rush the passer. Mondo does that, and he plays special teams. That makes him a very hard out. Like he's a very tough guy to knock off this roster when he is a good special teams player. That really allows you to be like, well, yeah, we can skimp a little bit on a linebacker and we can throw this guy in there because he plays special teams. He's my number one choice. My number two would be Bugs. As much as good of a player as he is, I think he would be the next in line at risk. I think Carlos Davis, Loudermilk, I think those guys are safe. And I think all the top four, the veteran guys, are safe. So it's gonna be tough though for the Steelers to cut anyone.
See, like I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like they'll have to move on from someone. I think the interesting name potentially to watch for is Wormley. I think if Alu immediately signed with the Steelers instead of that whole saga with signing, like coming to agreement with the Jags but never signing the paper, getting COVID, then working his way back to Pittsburgh. I think if that whole saga never happened, I don't think we see Wormley get that contract. I think that was more of like, all right, we lost Alu. Which of these guys can play big snaps right away? They turn to Wormley. Alu comes back like a week and a half after that signing. Now things kind of like, now we put ourselves in a position here. I can't really see Wormley getting cut just because I think that might negatively affect the salary cap. But I think that might be one more name to try to keep in the back of your head. Back to the Isaiah Loudermilk stuff, though. Do you, and kind of on the same vein of what Andrew asked me earlier, do you like the Steelers moving a 4th-round pick to kind of round out their entire draft this year and having a pick in every single round? Are you okay with that now, or what's kind of your feeling on trading a pick that might be seen as a lot more valuable for a pick this year?
That's a complex one answer for me. Because first reaction, no, I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like it, especially trading up and then they select a position they are strong at with a guy who is a project, and they wait till the 7th round to address cornerback. And now you're down a 4th-round pick next year. So all those comp picks we're getting, we're losing one already. Like, we're already down one of the picks that we're hoping to gain. I did not like the trade. On the other hand, like I've said, I have a lot of faith in Carl Dunbar and taking guys that are kind of look like scrap heap kind of players and getting serviceable rotation guys out of them. Like, really doing good there. Alu obviously has taken off and has played his best football since he got matched up with Carl Dunbar, which is crazy as long as he's been a 1st-round pick and he's playing his best football ever last year. But we've also seen that with Bugs. We've seen that with Mondo. We've seen that with Carlos Davis. We're seeing guys turn into serviceable NFL players and possibly more. So on that side, looking at the fact that they traded specifically to get him, because it's pretty clear when you trade a 4th-round pick to get a 5th-round pick now, and you go and draft a player, you're not just saying, oh, hey, guys, let's pick best player available, but we're just going to trade a pick from next year and get an extra player. No, they wanted him specifically. And then to hear the stuff I'm hearing coming out, it sounds like they found another guy. Like, they found one of the guys they like, one of the type of players they wanted. So I'm more okay with it. I still don't like that draft capital. I'm not going to be happy when next year's draft comes along and we have holes that I'm sitting there going, if we had another 4th-round pick, it'd be a little easier.
Yeah.
I love adding people.
Me too. And then the Steelers only add people through the draft. Maybe they'll trade a 2023 3rd to get a 4th back. It'll just go on forever until like they're down 2 1st-round picks somehow. And we'll all be shaking our heads like, what the hell did we just do to ourselves? But whatever. To move on from some Isaiah Loudermilk talk and kind of move into OTAs, there's been some news, and really the last couple of days there's been some interesting stuff to come out. We'll start with the kind of the OTA stuff before we kind of break down Ben Roethlisberger's his interview, really his first one since what, that Cleveland game, I suppose. But the OTAs itself, we've kind of seen players and position groups kind of start to come in sort of in waves. Discussion Jeff Hartman and myself had the other day. It seems like the Steelers have just told guys like, hey, don't bother coming in first week. We'll have the receivers come in week 2 and so on and so forth. But the last 2 days, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, and today Eric Ebron showed up to OTAs. What do you think those 3 guys specifically will bring to this team this year? Of course, 2 second-year guys, and then Juju Smith-Schuster's the senior statesman, even though he's not the oldest receiver, but year 5 as a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah. Juju is the one I'm really interested in seeing. Really interested in seeing him in this offense. Randy Fichtner's offense did no favors for the number 1 receiver. It did no favors for Antonio Brown in 2018. It did no favors for Juju Smith-Schuster in 2019 or 2020. So I'm going to be interested in seeing what they do with him in Matt Canada's offense. I'm also interested to see he's talking about playing outside more. I'm interested in seeing that. Very interested in what he's going to be. And he's kind of a wild card for me as much as I love Juju and as much as he's already shown. And like we know what we're going to get on the field from him. He's kind of a wild card production-wise because it all depends on how Matt Canada wants to run this offense. Chase Claypool, I am expecting a big season from him. I think he's going to I don't think it's going to be like, top 5 in the NFL kind of season. I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver by the end of the season. I think he's the number 1 guy. I also think the number 1 guy isn't going to be what we think of and what we're used to with the AB years as a number 1 guy. I think the number 1 guy, it's possible it could be like, under 1,100 yards, even in a 17-game season, with as deep as they are, as many targets as they have. With you got tight ends like Eric Ebron. I have a lot of hope for Eric Ebron this season. I think Freiermuth is going to be a big help to him and his numbers, just playing less. By the end of the season, he was visibly having trouble. Like his back was causing him troubles. He was having trouble making cuts. You're just seeing a guy that got worn down. And as big as he is and athletic as he is and as old as he is, you want to rest his snaps. You want to put him on a snap count. You want to watch his usage and really, focus on using him where he's best and get Freiermuth out there. Let Freiermuth play more. Use more creativity, stuff like that. You don't need Eric Ebron out there every play like we did last season.
Now, of course, OTAs, like basically you hear nothing but great stuff coming out about all the players. It's just kind of the way this time of the year goes. Do you take any stock out of the stuff that comes out of these practices? Does it mean anything to you? Do you pay attention even to this kind of stuff?
I pay attention to a little bit. I like hearing what the coaches and the players are saying. I don't pay attention to like, oh, look at this beautiful pass. Ben Roethlisberger under zero pressure through to like this receiver with no one covering him. Wow, look at that catch. Like it's practice, Or like they showed that pass of Ben overthrowing Chase Claypool, and Chase Claypool was like clearly jogging. Right? Yeah. Like you're like, this is like warm-up throws, guys. It doesn't matter. Like this is not what matters. People are raving about Dwayne Haskins because people are talking about, wow, look how pretty he is throwing the ball. Well, yeah, it's football in shorts. And in football in shorts, you can learn 3 things. You can learn jack, diddly, and squat. Nothing. OTAs is football in shorts, and you will learn nothing about what these guys are going to do in the games. What their production is going to be, how good they're going to be. That's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is guys like an Isaiah Loudermilk. Is he learning the technique? How much work is he putting in? Najee Harris, is he putting in the work to learn the offense? That's the stuff that stands out to me, is looking at guys and the work they are doing. What are they working on? That's the important thing to me. Other than that, I mean, like a guy like Cameron Hayward, what are you going to learn from him in OTAs? He's there. He's still Cam Hayward. Like, is he still as good as he was last year? I don't even know. You can't tell. It's OTAs, right? It's just guys like that. I don't even know what the point is of them being there. Just getting the practice, warming up. You're not learning anything. Well,
then again, it is a new offense. So I think there is something important there for Ben and them. But like you said, you brought up Najee Harris's name. We can kind of even transition this to the Ben Roethlisberger interview breakdown portion of tonight's show. He specifically singled out Najee Harris. Well, of course, he was asked about him, but he went on to say that Eddie Faulkner told him, hey, kid, get the hell out of here. I want to go home. I want to see my family. Because he's just that workaholic. What do you think about that? Does that make you more excited about this top pick?
That's that's what we heard on our podcast. We were talking to the Alabama guys, is that he was just always working. We heard that Tomlin talking about he came in with an elite level of conditioning, which is something you never hear from Tomlin. Tomlin's always like, yeah, they're good, but we're going to get them in there, work on their conditioning. He came in and Mike Tomlin was like, this guy is ready to go. Like NFL ready conditioning, which is crazy for a college kid to pull that off. That is a serious work ethic when you don't have coaches, you don't have trainers, you don't have the access to staff. You have limited time you can spend with staff. As a professional, you don't have those limits. You're limited by how long they're willing to stay and work with you. And then you can hire your own people to work with you in the offseason. There's no limit to the amount of work they can do, just, being smart and not overtaxing their body, really. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see that continue. And it makes me more comfortable with his health, injury-wise, because what we normally see with running backs, specifically running backs, but across the board, when an athlete greatly increases the amount of work they're doing, like when they increase the physical toll, like if you push your workouts to the next level, all of a sudden, you're going to be more susceptible to injury. When you're taking a giant leap in the amount of carries and the amount of hits you're taking, you're more susceptible to injury. And with a Najee Harris who wasn't ever getting tons and tons of carries and touches in college, he wasn't that guy. You're looking at a potential ramp up in usage. It's good to know that he is already prepared physically. He's been training himself for this for a long time. So it's exciting for me, and it's exciting to hear that that's continuing.
Yeah, and really, I could quite easily go on about Najee and all the great things we've heard about him easily through the end of the show, and probably about 10 others past that. But just to continue to move along through stuff Ben said, he complimented Dwayne Haskins, and I just want that to marinate a little bit. He complimented another quarterback. The only other time he's done that in his near 20-year career that I can think of is talking about Josh Dobbs being a genius. And if I recall correctly, the question was more so centered around Mason Rudolph, and he deflected it to talk about his buddy Josh Dobbs and how smart he is and how much he loves him. Does that mean something to you? Are you all of a sudden oh, okay, maybe the Steelers might have gotten something? It might not be we don't know if it's going to be anything, but he's complimenting another quarterback. To me, that means at least something. Does it to you as well?
Yeah, and James Washington said he throws really hard. So he's gotten a lot of compliments on his arm talent, right? And how pretty his release is, how pretty that is. Again, it's still football in shorts. You can throw a beautiful ball, but can you make a play under pressure? I think is more important. Devlin Hodges threw an ugly football, didn't have a lot of talent, but under pressure he was better than he was in practice. So he actually won us some games. And then there's guys who can throw a pretty ball. That's fine. You can throw a pretty ball, but if you can't make plays under pressure, you're not going to win in the NFL. So for me, I like hearing that. I like hearing the positivity because what it tells me is at least he's not a problem. If Dwayne Haskins was a problem, if he was someone people didn't like, they wouldn't compliment him even if he did look great, right? So there's a little bit there. I think that it's showing the Steelers players and coaches have a little more investment in him than his contract would denote. And other than that, man, I can't wait till preseason. When we get to see, Dwayne Haskins out there as this boy as this guy that's been built up by all the teams, the kind of the golden boy, and Mason Rudolph, who's kind of getting overlooked. I really hope we see a situation where like Dwayne Haskins is like, all right, I found a place. Let's go out and take this job. And you've got Mason Rudolph with a bit of his chip on his shoulder, playing and saying, hey, I'm not bad. That's my spot, and you're not taking it. I want to see that. I want to see a fire under these guys. I want to see some competition. I want to see some great preseason football after Ben leaves.
You know what? If I wasn't writing for this website, I would make a point of watching every single preseason game to watch that competition. This is going to be probably the most thrilling storyline I can think of in my lifetime of Steelers preseason football. So, like, that's something to watch.
Yeah, if you're thinking about, like, what was the last time we had two backup quarterbacks this good? Like, really that good, and also young.
Yeah,
like, we've had, like, Brian
Mike
Leftwich
Vick
and Charlie Batch, who were both former starters, but there wasn't any competition there. Batch was old. Like, Leftwich was older. They weren't on the ups. They weren't, on the ascension. So I think it does have a chance to be a special thing to watch this preseason.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Just to continue to move on, Ben did say a lot, so I don't think we'll get through all of it tonight. But one of the other things he did say, he mentioned that his elbow was completely reconstructed. I should say that is a real word. Is that just Ben being his typical diva self? Like, to me, it sounded like a couple ligaments were just kind of reattached. But Ben said it was complete reconstruction. I did again.
They restructured his elbow contract.
Exactly. Which is another thing they talked about. But anyway, do you think Ben's just full of it right now, or was that way more than what we're actually led to believe?
You never know with Ben. It was such a Ben conversation.
Oh,
right.
So, yeah.
He's just like, oh, my elbow. Yeah, they had to glue my arm back on, dude. And as they're gluing it on, I'm like, Steelers, anything you want? You want me to walk your dog? I love you guys. You're my favorite. I love all of this. This is the only franchise I ever want to have anything to do with ever in the history of my life. It's Ben. It's Ben being Ben. And the saying is, even when he says the right things and actually means them, he comes across the same way. And you're like, is he being genuine? Is this real? Like, he's not a dude that conveys that. He's just that guy that, like, whenever he says anything, you're like, really? Is that really? Like, whether he's serious or not. So I don't know. What stands out to me, though, is he's there. And you can see he is really present, and he is putting an effort to kind of lead, to be the quarterback he kind of needs to be. And I think that is a direct result of last season, the end of that season, how they lost, the rumors and the appearance, and even the way Kevin Colbert was talking, like he was sending a signal to Ben, like, you know what? We're okay if you move on. Like, you can go. And we'll be like, oh, had great times with you, buddy, but we're ready to, we're okay moving on now. This isn't a couple years ago when talking about Ben leaving would be like, oh gosh, no, don't do that to the franchise. They were a little more okay with it. And I think that hit Ben. I think that really hit him. And he's like, I'm going to have to get, like, this is my chance to get back. I couldn't last season. Like, there was no off season. And even when he was there, like, he was limited on his throws. Then he's feeling out his new elbow. And then all of a sudden the season starts after no preseason games. And it's like, here's a bunch of guys you haven't thrown to before. Go out there and make stuff happen in this offense that you barely got to practice, with Matt Canada's system. So I think he's there. One of the things we talked about is Ben needs to buy in. I think we're seeing a buy-in.
So far, yeah.
That's what it looks like, is he's bought in. So I like that. That's what I like, is it looks like we have a buy-in from Ben.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. One last thought here before we do our usual wrap-up, but to me, Ben Roethlisberger, when it will be his time to retire, he seems like the kind of guy throughout his career, he has a bruise, but he lays on the field like he's been shot for 20 minutes. He gets up and leads the fourth quarter comeback. Like, how many times that happened? Like, if you had a nickel for every time that happened, you'd be a very, very rich person. And, like, that's not even a joke. That's just the way it is. We know our quarterback is a diva. to me, I feel like we will know wholeheartedly when Ben Roethlisberger's final season will be, well before that season even starts. Like, I feel like he's the kind of guy that would kind of want, like, not to compare him to, but like when Kobe Bryant retired. We knew it before the season. He announced it. Every single stadium he went to, he got like a nice little plaque or like a hoop from his first game that they somehow still had, or whatever. Like, he was presented with something, like, not necessarily like him getting those that kind of treatment, but like that, this is his last season. Like, do you agree with that? Do you think like when it really is Ben's time to hang him up, we will know before football is actually completed being played?
I actually don't. I think, in my opinion, Ben's more of the guy who's going to suddenly be like, he's going to wake up one day and be like, you know what, I'm done. And he's just going to check out. Hopefully it's not in the middle of a season, because he's the kind of guy, in my opinion, he's the kind of guy that if he hits that, you're not going to want him as your quarterback after that moment. When he suddenly like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to buy police dogs and all this stuff. Like, he's done. He'll be done. I think he's more that kind of thing than really being like, I want all the attention on me. Because he's also at the same time, like, he could have a bruise on his elbow, or he could have a legitimately broken arm, and you're going to get the same reaction from him. He's still going to go out there and do things. I think he's, he's still going to do the same no matter what. I don't know. I think he's the guy he's going to wake up one day and just be done.
And you know what? I agree with that as well. I think we'll either see Ben Roethlisberger just play really, like, I could see him have a great year this year and be like, you know what? I want a retirement run and just like pat myself on the back. Or he's just terrible this year and everyone's like, dude, you gotta go. I feel like that's probably after how you broke it down. I feel like that's probably one or two ways that it goes down. I wouldn't be surprised by either way. Even if they won a Super Bowl, like I know there's people that think, oh yeah, he'd be done. I agree that there's a chance that he might come back, try to get that fourth, try to chase Terry. I wouldn't be surprised. But we are at the top of the hour here, or I guess the bottom of the hour now, running the other side. But do you have anything you want to plug, Geoffrey, before we sign out?
Yeah, I'm doing an overall arcing series on Matt Canada, just grabbing plays from like different years. I'm trying to get every single team he coached for. Indiana is hard. Some of them are hard to get good film on, but I'm just going through different plays, showing things he did, and eventually that's going to work around to early in the Steelers season, where some of the things we talk about with Ben, some of the narratives I've even seen coming up in the chat, where Ben had said, like, I'm not against going under center. Well, we're going to see that. We're going to see him using play action. We're going to see him in the pistol. We're going to see Matt Canada's motions, and then the Steelers throw the ball, because they did that stuff early in the season. It's just hard to remember with how the rest of the season went. It's hard to remember what they were doing those first couple of games. But we've seen some of it. And so we're really working on like what Matt Canada, what to expect from this offense, what to expect coming forward in this season where Matt Canada is fully in charge of this offense. And it's been a very interesting series. It's been interesting for me to see some of the things that go on. So check that out. And as always, the Vertex I do with Dave Schofield. That's one of my favorite pieces I do each week.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Check those out. Also, just click over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. It should be your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm telling you, the content coming out there is outstanding. As Geoffrey Benedict's earpiece falls out of his head, goodness gracious, we're falling apart here at the end of the show. But one last thing to check out, as I really got Geoffrey laughing now, make sure you just click over to the podcast platform side. If you don't already do so, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, what have you, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, because there's stuff that you won't get on YouTube or Facebook that you will get on those platforming options. So make sure you're clicking on all those sites. Thank you once again for tuning in to tonight's Curtain Call. We will see you guys next week. Talk to you soon, guys.